Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Ever felt that almost desperate need to connect with someone? Even when they're pushing you away. That's kind of the core of what we're looking at today. It's My Darling Boy by Dufresne. A contemporary novel really dives deep into these messy family relationships. Hit that like button if you haven't already, and subscribe. Stick around. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Oh, and link to the book down in the description. So this book, it introduces us to Olney Kartheizer. He's a retired journalist down in Florida, and he's just desperately trying to reconnect with his son, Cully. But Cully's, while he's battling addiction, living a pretty, transient life, makes it tough for Olney to even track him down. One thing that really struck me, early on, is how Dufresne kind of weaves in all these seemingly separate storylines. We meet all these different characters, their lives all kind of brush up against Olney's. Creates this really intricate web of connections.
Yeah, it's fascinating how these narratives that seem totally unrelated, they actually reflect these bigger themes in the book. You see how family dynamics play out, like the ripples of choices and this universal need to connect, especially in a world that can feel, really isolating.
Right, like everyone's searching for something, their own version of belonging. Like when Olney finds this random photo under a park bench, and he just starts making up this whole backstory for the guy in the picture, named him Buck. Imagined his entire life, even his death. Kind of funny, but also kind of reveals something deeper about Olney. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. It shows how much Only needs to create these stories. To find meaning, connection, even in the most random places, makes you wonder, is this his way of dealing with the lack of connection with his own son? Like he's trying to understand Cully by, I don't know, inventing stories about other lost people.
Makes a lot of sense. And speaking of Cully, we learn about this pretty intense moment from his past. He and a friend attempted suicide. Cully survived, but his friend, Orson, didn't. The book doesn't shy away from that darkness. Addiction, the consequences. It's heavy stuff.
Yeah. And this event, it brings up that question of Only's responsibility as a parent, right? He carries so much guilt, feels like he failed Cully somehow. But the book, it doesn't give you easy answers. You have to wrestle with this. How much responsibility does a parent have for the choices their adult child makes? Is it fair for Only to blame himself?
Such a tough question. And I think the book handles it well, presents all those sides without, judging. But even with all the heavy stuff, there are these moments of humor that really stand out. Like when Olney goes to see a psychic, Orly, her name is, hoping for some insight into finding Cully. It's almost comical. Especially when she picks up on this thing with Julie, a friend of Olney's. Orly senses that Julie won't get help from her biological parents, which Julie doesn't even know about yet.
Hmm. It is interesting how that encounter, lighthearted as it seems, it actually touches on something deeper. That tension between hope and reality. Almy's holding on to any bit of hope he can find, even if it means going to a psychic, right? And Julie, even though she doesn't know the specifics about her parents, she's also holding on to a hope that, well, might not be realistic. Makes you think about the role of hope in our lives. Is it just a necessary delusion? Or can it actually lead us to the truth?
Love how Dufresne weaves in those deeper layers into what seem like simple encounters. And speaking of searching for answers, Olney even hires a private investigator to find Cully. But even that leads nowhere.
Shows how much Cully wants to disappear. To cut ties with his past, his family. What does that say about his state of mind, his relationship with his father? It's powerful. That kind of rejection makes you think, what would drive someone to choose that level of isolation? Almost like he's running from, I don't know, something more than just his dad, maybe himself, the pain, or the fear of what the future holds.
Definitely complicated. And I think it gets at those bigger themes, the guilt, redemption, all that, running through the whole book. While he's looking for Cully, Olney's also wrestling with his own past, right? His marriage fell apart, all the stress of Cully's addiction. And now he's stuck trying to piece together his memories, wondering how much of what he remembers is even, actually true.
Yeah, there's that sense of only searching for himself, as much as he's searching for his son, trying to make sense of it all, find some meaning, some purpose in all the mess.
And that search, it takes him to some pretty strange places. Remember that couple he stays with while he's looking for Cully? The husband, Guy, has this totally bizarre sleep pattern. Sleeps in 40-minute bursts and never dreams. How weird is that?
It's definitely strange, but I think it ties into that whole theme of sleep and dreams that runs through the book. It's like Dufresne is using sleep as this metaphor, right? For escaping reality, shutting out the pain. Guy not being able to dream, maybe it represents him not being able to face his own past, his traumas. Like he's keeping those memories locked away.
Wow, that's a really insightful way to look at it. It makes you wonder what Dufresne is saying about, I don't know, consciousness,
Yeah.
memory, the way we deal with our experiences. Is it better to face our demons head on? Or do we need those times of escape, even if it means kind of burying parts of ourselves?
That question, it comes up again and again in the book. Only in his own way, he's also looking for escape. But his way is through that constant searching, trying to find answers outside himself. But maybe the real answers, they lie inside, in facing those internal struggles.
Yeah, and those struggles, they're definitely there for a lot of the characters. There's this scene, Olney actually sees Cully for a second at a bus stop, but he misses the chance to connect with him. The bus pulls up just as Olney's running towards him, and when it drives away, Cully's gone. It's heartbreaking. It really captures that frustrating distance between them.
Like they're always just out of reach. Physically and emotionally, it speaks to that longing, that search for fulfillment that never quite gets there. Only so focused on finding Cully, he might be missing those chances to connect that are right there in front of him.
That's a great point. And talking about misconnections, we also see Cully struggling in his own relationships. His interactions with Shane, this kind of friend, and Jasmine, the mother of his child. It's messy, really dysfunctional.
Yeah, Cully, he seems drawn to that chaos. Like he's sabotaging any chance at stability, at being happy. His thing with Shane is especially toxic, fueled by addiction, the shared feeling of hopelessness. And with Jasmine, there's so much tension, regret. You see how much damage addiction does to families.
It's like a reminder that these patterns, they repeat, they get passed down. Cully's making some of the same mistakes his father made. Stuck in that cycle of self-destruction.
And yet, even with all the darkness, there's still some hope. Remember when Olney runs into Ellis, his ex-wife's new husband, down at the beach? It's awkward, but there's that shared history there. A family, even though it's broken, still trying to, I don't know, find its way.
Shows that even the most broken relationships, they can still heal. There's still potential for understanding. Forgiveness, even.
And that potential, that's something Olney's wrestling with as he keeps searching. He goes to the pawn shop where Cully was working, no luck, ends up back at the beach, desperate for any sign of his son. It feels urgent, like time's running out.
And it's made even more urgent by Olney's own health, right? And Moreo, the woman he's close to, she's in the hospital fighting cancer. It's like he's surrounded by these reminders of death, of how precious time is.
Almost like he's coming to terms with the possibility that he might not find Cully, that some things we just can't control. And as he realizes that, his focus starts to change. He starts writing obituaries for people who don't usually get them, the homeless, the forgotten, the people society ignores.
That's beautiful. Giving a voice to the voiceless. And in doing that, Olney seems to find a different purpose. A way to make meaning out of loss, to leave his own mark on the world. It's like he's not just looking for his son anymore. He's looking for, I don't know, meaning in a bigger sense. Maybe that's part of how he heals too.
Yeah, I think so. It's like by honoring these forgotten people, he's also making peace with his own past, the choices he made, the relationships he struggled with.
And that search for peace, it leads him back to Melancholy. That's the town where Cully's living. Olney checks into this kind of rundown motel, the Dixiewood, and starts asking around, trying to find any trace of Cully. And the Dixiewood's like a whole little world in itself, filled with these quirky characters, each with their own baggage, their own secrets.
Right. You've got Robbie, the motel owner. She used to be a nun. Can you believe that? And Dante, who says he's psychic, and Guy, ex-military, definitely seen some things. It's a strange mix of people, but they form this odd kind of family. They look out for each other, each in their own way.
Like they've all found a place to hide out, on the fringes, looking for comfort, connection. And Olney, while he's searching for Cully, ends up finding a different kind of connection with these people. But even with these new connections, he still longs for his son. He finally gets a call, someone who's seen Cully, a spark of hope. Maybe they'll finally reunite.
And all this is happening while Olney's ex-wife, Kat, she's also looking for Cully. She moved to Melancholy to, try to start over. And she keeps running into him, even though he's trying to avoid her. It's like they're on these parallel paths, both dealing with their pain, trying to find some kind of resolution with their son.
Drawn to the same place, the same search, even though they're going about it so differently. And that tension just keeps building. Olney finally gets Cully to agree to meet him at the Kofi Clash. But of course, typical Cully doesn't show. Another blow for Olney. They just can't seem to connect.
Really shows you how cyclical their relationship is, that back and forth. Hope, disappointment, connection, rejection. Makes you wonder if they're just destined to keep missing each other. Stuck in that pattern forever.
Yeah. And as if things weren't complicated enough, it gets even darker. Cully gets jumped by these thugs. Turns out they're after Dante for some reason. Olney and Guy find him, and Guy, well, he decides to take matters into his own hands. Teach those thugs a lesson.
Yeah, that's a disturbing turn. Shows how much violence is out there, how trauma just keeps getting passed on. Gets his reaction, it's extreme, shows his own issues with anger, with control, makes you question his methods, especially since he ends up shooting one of the thugs right in the foot.
Violence just leads to more violence. It's a cycle that's hard to break. And Olney's right in the middle of it. He wants to protect his son, but he also sees how dangerous Guy's actions are.
And all this is playing out while Olney's own health is failing and Morale's battling cancer. It's like life just keeps piling it on, forcing him to face his own mortality and how fragile the people he cares about are.
It's a lot. Makes you wonder if there's any chance for peace, for happiness, with all this suffering.
But even in the darkest parts, there are those little moments of hope, of connection. Remember when Guy's making that ropa vieja in his crock pot, and he invites Olney and Cully to eat with him by the fire pit? It's a small thing, but it's a moment of normalcy, a family meal, this brief feeling of togetherness.
Reminds you that even the most broken relationships, they can still have those moments, however short they are. And those moments, they're what keep Olney going, even with all the setbacks.
Exactly. It's about finding those little victories, those sparks of hope, even when everything seems so overwhelming. And in the end, that's what My Darling Boy is really about, isn't it? That love, that connection, they endear, even in the toughest times.
It's powerful. Stays with you. What about you? What stood out to you most in our deep dive? What really resonated? Tell us. Leave a comment below. Share your favorite moment from My Darling Boy. And if you enjoyed this episode, pass it along. We always appreciate it. Thanks for listening.